is his part 7, a cameo about Juan. My argument needs shoring up with another example, so let me make use, why not, everybody else did, of a former landscaper named Juan, who had been deported from Phoenix and was now situated in a bright, clean dirt lot across the street from Father Sean's migrant center by the Mariposa port of entry. His face was brown and lean. His beard was going gray. Given how he had to live, he kept himself extremely clean. His eyes were clear, almost gentle, and he smiled at me, even before I gave him money. A long line of stalled white trucks awaiting international inspection composed the horizon behind him. I inquired about his time in the United States, and he said, quote, "Well, the life was fine, it was good, but sometimes one commits errors. The people I was working for didn't want to pay me, so after 2 weeks they called La Migra, and I was deported. I was staying at the boss's house, and I told him I didn't want to work anymore, so he called La Migra. We were getting ready to get on the trucks to go to Dickinson, and I didn't want to go since I hadn't been paid. So the police came first, and they checked my papers, and then they called La Migra. I worked really well. I worked hard. I tried to talk to a lawyer who ignored me, said there was nothing they could do. The police called La Migra, and they took me away." Close quote. Juan could not get over it. I might have felt the same. So he kept telling over and over again the wrong against him. Quote, "The first time when I crossed over to work, I arrived at a depot, and they were saying, 'No, don't go, don't go.'" Footnote, the interpreter and I could not quite entirely understand this sentence, but I have left it for its poetic value. Quote, "The first time when I crossed over to work, I arrived at a depot and they were saying, 'No, don't go, don't go.' I was there with La Migra and everyone else had gone away to Dickinson. And the boss, who was Mexican, there's a footnote, said, 'Oh, just stay here and I will send my brother back with your money.' When I went before a judge and told him about my wages being stolen, the judge said there was nothing he could do. I was put in prison for 3 years in Fargo, North Dakota." Close quote. To recapitulate, Juan had worked for nothing. He, as my literary agent would say about her own efforts, added value to our economy, which returned him nothing. From a trumpeter's standpoint, what's not to like? And then the trumpeter's supposed best friend, La Migra, took over. And instead of booting him expeditiously out, they drilled the taxpayers for 3 ever-loving years. Juan had become a very expensive migrant indeed. What did the prison look like? Quote, "It was okay. It was a GEO prison, a private company, a real big one. The first 3 months was in Fargo, then the rest was in Oklahoma, near the place where there was that disaster." 2 footnotes here. In fact, there is no GEO facility in North Dakota, and the disaster, Timothy McVeigh's masterwork, I presume, is what Vollman says. The bombing of the federal building. So it was somewhere near there. And what did you do any day? Quote, "We did the same thing all the time, just watched TV. There were 8 of us. We got to go out 1 hour a day for exercise. That was all." Close quote. Was there violence in your cell? Quote, "I didn't have problems. The people who were there for a few months were not violent. After 3 years, they put me on a bus with handcuffs. It took 2 days. There were only about 2 women on the bus. The rest were men." Close quote. The footnote to this is the ICE response to a fact-checking question about restraints may be of interest. Quote, "Restraints are used as a precaution against escape during transfer. The following restraint equipment is authorized. 1. Handcuffs, stainless steel, 10 ounce. 2. Leg irons, stainless steel, and must meet the National Institute of Justice standard. 3. Martin chain. 4. Waist or belly chain, case-hardened chains with a minimum breaking strength of approximately 800 pounds. 5. Handcuff cover, cases for the security of handcuffs used on high-security detainees. 6. Soft restraints, nylon leather type with soft arm and leg cuffs containing soft belts with key locks. 7. Plastic cuffs, disposable. And 8. Any other ICE/ERO approved restraint device. Close quote. What happened when someone had to go to the restroom? Quote, they unhooked one handcuff and then hooked one to your belt. Close quote. And then, quote, they left me right at the line and they watched until I went across. Close quote. Where had you come from? Quote, I was in Ciudad Obregón. So what made you decide on Nogales? Quote, it's a nice warm climate and I had no reason to go back. Close quote. People with fortunes as fine as Juan's generally get luckier and luckier. Quote, I have had 2 months of work here, he said. Quote, I sleep here on the other side of the wall. I was on the highway digging out the little canals where the water runs down. They told me they were going to pay me one rate, and at the end of the month they paid less, so I left. We were working 7 days a week, sometimes at night, and it was all lies. They told me the work was from 7 to 3 at 300 pesos a day, but it was only 100. Sometimes I eat at that shelter, but they haven't called me there today. Then I look around for day labor. Close quote. Remembering what so many taxi drivers had told me, I asked, quote, is it dangerous here with the mafias? Quote, if I don't mess with them, they leave me alone. Close quote. What if you said, I want a job with the mafia? Quote, well, I don't know. You don't want to get involved. Close quote. His baseball cap bore the American flag and the eagle, and his jacket memorialized San Francisco. How could the brassiest trumpeter bray against that? He camped a few steps from where I'd found him, in a niche in the cinder block wall on which someone had employed large capital letters to inscribe something about God. The front of his space was entirely open, and one of the side walls went as high as his shoulder. This was no fortified lair, but a place for a strong, desperate, or well-connected man. I saw 2 mattresses with blankets on them. One bed was made and the other awry. He said the second mattress was in case anyone else needed a place to sleep. The floor was grimy black. In one corner I saw an empty plastic cup on its side, a disposable dish with a bit of food still in it, and a tied-up plastic bag containing something unknown. In another, a scrap of rope lay upon a scorched place. Since I was supposed to ask him about border security, I inquired, quote, how often do you see the pollos crossing? Quote, before, yes, but they don't come through here anymore, close quote. Hurrah for border security! On this subject, Rachel Wilson remarked, quote, actually, the number of people seeking asylum at the port of entry has not increased. So this strategy appears to be a deliberate attempt to make us think the border is overwhelmed, close quote. There's a footnote. The Mexican policeman had in fact said that the number of would-be border crossers had increased in his sector, but, quote, a bipartisan group of 58 former senior national security officials stated that, quote, illegal border crossings are near 40-year lows, close quote. Homeland Security statistics indicate that from 2006 to 2016, quote, undetected unlawful entries from Mexico fell from approximately 851,000 to around 62,000. That's Ellen Nakashima, Washington Post, February 25th of this year. Quote, ex-officials claim no factual basis for wall emergency. That was that footnote. Remembering Antonia and the others, I asked, how far would you have to walk to come to the end of the wall? Quote, oh, it's pretty far. You have to take a car. I don't know, because they're building the wall. Close quote. Part 8, Eulalia's story concluded. So there was Juan, and here was Eulalia, gesturing, speaking steadily and flatly, clasping her hands against her little heart, her dark braids flashing against the white walls when she turned her head. What do you hope for? I asked her. She named her judge and continued without apparent feeling. Quote, when he saw me the first time, he denied me asylum and said I could appeal, so I appealed, close quote. If you get asylum, what is your plan for your life? Quote, if I get out, I'll live with my relatives here and I'll study English. We had no money in Guatemala, so Mama could send me to school only to third grade. I want to go to school very much. Close quote. Is there anything we can do for you? Quote, I give you thanks for talking and listening to me and for your support. Close quote. We rose and I shook her hand. She departed, and while waiting for the second detainee, Jose, I noticed that on the wooden partition someone had written Jesus. Jesus. I wonder if Eulalia ever did get out of Eloy. Where would I like to imagine her? For those 3 odd days of typical sheltership, she might have rested with Diane, that good-hearted Methodist whose smile and neck-looped name tag were what first met me when I began this story. About her flock, Diane said, quote, these are the most loving, compassionate people I've ever worked with. And in the short time that we have our people, which is anywhere from 3 hours to a week, mostly about 2 days, we get to love them, and they show us a great deal of love. Close quote. That's about the halfway point, and we're going to pick the second half up tomorrow. Thank you.